Hey there, welcome to the Wealth Seed. This is episode 65, and we are actually in the midst of a series, if you will, that's getting getting organized in our finances series. So this is part 4 of that, but episode number 65 of the Wealth Seed. And so today, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to focus on the importance of building an emergency fund. We're going to discuss how much you should save in your emergency fund. We're going to talk about strategies for saving. We're going to talk about ways to stay committed to your financial goal. And we're also going to, of course, incorporate biblical principles to provide a spiritual perspective on preparing for the future and trusting in God's provision. So once again, welcome to the Wealth Seed. Let me fix this little camera here, and we're going to get started. So I want to welcome back our listeners who are faithful and are back to the podcast. I want to welcome those of you who are new to our podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. If this is your first time tuning into this podcast, let us know. We want to know. We want to celebrate you. And just everyone in general, let us know who you are and where you are watching from. All right. The last time I came before you, which was a couple weeks ago, right? We missed a week, missed a couple weeks, I think. But it's summertime. Things are moving and shifting with the children. So we thank you for bearing with us. But the last time we talked about managing debt, right? And I provided you all a couple of practical strategies for getting on that debt elimination path. We talked about debt and how it could affect you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So make sure that you go back and you capture or that you watch that episode. Okay. All right. So let's get on to today's topic at hand. We are talking about the importance of building an unshakable emergency fund, because y'all know my word for the year has been unshakable. And when God gave me that word, it was no mistake, because in so many facets of our life, so many areas of our life, it is important that we are getting rooted, right? First in God's word, right? Getting rooted in his word so that we can be rooted in these various aspects of our lives and rooted in a healthy way, right? So what is an emergency fund and what is its purpose? All right. So an emergency fund is really what some would call like a financial cushion, right? For unexpected expenses. So maybe you lose a job, right? Unfortunately, and I pray this is not anyone's plight, you lose a loved one. And so maybe there's some, financial loss because of that. Some might consider, like some unexpected car repairs and things of that nature. But we're going to talk about these things that are supposedly unexpected, but may not necessarily have to be unexpected, right? Some unexpected medical bills. So things like this, right? What an emergency fund is not for is just, I want to go out with the boys and the girls. I'm a little short. Let me dip in my emergency fund and do that. No, that's not what that's for. Okay. And this is the reason why most people cannot build an unshakable emergency fund, is because they keep going into it for things that are not emergencies, right? So an emergency also prevents you from being reliant on credit cards or personal loans, or the worst of the kind of loans like payday loans, right? Those things are predatory. But it keeps you from relying on those things when you have emergencies. Okay. And an emergency fund can also provide a peace of mind and financial stability. There is nothing like knowing, like, hey, if something comes up, no issue, right? We have the financial means to take care of it. So Proverbs 6 verse 6 to 8 says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." Listen, this is such a profound passage of scripture, right? It tells us, look at the ant, okay? Now, ants, we know they're not created like us, like humans. They're not created with intuition and they have instinct, something else, right? But they don't have the brains that we have and the ability to do the things that we do, right? But even the ant knows that it is to store its provisions in the summer and gather its food at the harvest. What does that mean? It means that when things are great, okay, because typically summertime is associated with good times, is associated with fun, it's associated with, doing a lot of activities and all that kind of stuff. So when things are good, right, you should be gathering, you should be storing. Okay. It also says, and it gathers its food at harvest. So when there's plenty, when the harvest is plentiful, you should be taking some of that and you should be putting it away. Let me bring it home a little bit even more. In the times where you are making good money, okay, because we all go through these phases. There are times we're making really good money, and then sometimes things happen, job loss or layoffs, or we just decide we want to change up and do something else, whatever. Things happen and our incomes can be affected. So while the getting is good, right? Store up. While there is a plentiful harvest, gather your food, okay, and put it up. And that's what you want to do with an emergency fund, because, you prayerfully, when times are low, that's the stash that you want to go to, okay? But if you don't have that to go to and you're trying to establish one while times are hard, it's going to be really tough, right? You can, now, if you're going through tough times and you don't have an emergency fund, I'm still going to encourage you to yes, establish an emergency fund. What, Lexi, are you crazy? I can't even pay bills. Let me tell you something. Those creditors, they can care less about you, okay? Stuff's already cut off, right? Now, I'm not saying don't pay it. Don't walk away from here saying, Lexi said don't pay my bills. That is not what I'm saying, right? What I am saying is, if you followed me long enough, you know that I teach that take care of you, right? Take care of the kingdom of God. Then the next person you should be taking care of is you. So emergency fund, retirement, opportunity fund, right? I don't have to go through all that. We've been there before. So take care of you. So if that means that even in tough times, all I can put away is $1, put away the $1. If all you can put away is the $5, put away the $5, okay? It is important to prepare for the future and be diligent in saving. In the Bible, the story of Joseph, when he is older, he gets out of jail. He is now, real big wig in the palace, and he's been put in charge. And he was put in charge because he was able to decipher a dream where the king was being told, hey, you're going to have 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And Joseph had given a strategy for how to put up during the 7 years of plenty, so that when the 7 years of famine came, everyone in that kingdom would be fine. And they were, right? So go read it. It's a wonderful strategy that still works today. So it is important to prepare for the future. It is important to be diligent in your saving. What does that mean? That it is non-negotiable. I don't care what happens. Whatever you say you are committed to, if you're committed to putting up $10 a week, be committed to that. It is non-negotiable. Okay. Now, of course, if you can put up more than that, okay, then don't just do $10, because $10, is not going to cut it. All right. But if that's all that you have, then do that. It's better than doing nothing at all. Okay. So let's now talk about how much you should save in an emergency fund. Now, the general recommendation is usually about 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. Considering what happened in 2020, right, where we had to quarantine and we quarantined for a while, and then even after like a strict quarantine period, there was still kind of a semi, right? And so a lot of people had interruptions to their jobs, all kinds of things, right? So this is the reason why it is generally recommended 3 to 6 months. And I even say 9 months, right? But start with a, achievable goal to get yourself going and excited. Because sometimes when you're like 6 months, oh my God, how can I do that, right? Sometimes start with, can we get 1 month, right? Then can we move and get 3 months? Can we get 6 months? How much are we saving? Whatever your living expenses are, okay? So that's going to require you to sit down and calculate, what are my expenses for the month, okay? I spend $3,000 a month. That includes every, mortgage, car, whatever the case may be. I'm making up numbers. It could be more or less for you. And also really consider what you would absolutely need to have when times are tight. Are there some things that you can put on pause, or some things that you can just cut out entirely when things are tight? So do that. And you're going to come up with your number for how much you should save. Okay. You're going to come up with that number that you spend for the month. And then of course you multiply it by 3 to get the 3-month number, multiply by 6 to get the 6-month number, multiply by 9 to get the 9-month number, right? Multiply by 12 to get the 12-month number. All right. That is what you need to do. But a beginning goal, 1 month, then 3 months, then get to 6 months. If you can get to 6 months, you're doing really well. Okay. But once you get to 6 months, don't stop there. Keep contributing to it. Okay. So general recommendation, 3 to 6 months of your living expenses, right? I already talked about, you want to consider in tight times, your job stability, like look at where you're working at now. Can it be stable? And again, 2020 taught us like, yeah, lots of things that we thought were stable may not necessarily be stable. Okay. So we have to prepare for those years of famine. They do happen. Okay. Think about your health, right? If you're a person who really needs a lot of attention in the health department, you've got some things going on, so you go very regularly, you got to think about that and make sure that you're preparing for that as well. If you've got children, you got to think about that as well. Now, there are a couple of other things that I also tell people, that part of your emergency fund also should be spent on disaster relief types of things, right? Candles, storing up of non-perishable foods, water, bottled water, right? So you should have like, I don't know, maybe 3 months of water. Okay. So not just money, right? You start off putting up money, but then you want to take a third of that going towards like disaster relief type stuff, and then a third of it in food, and another third in your, to cover expenses. Okay. So, all right, something to think about. Let's look at another biblical reference. This is what I had referred to already, I think, the story of Joseph. So Genesis chapter 41, verses 34 to 36. I'm reading from the NIV. It says, let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. So this was Joseph giving his strategy, okay? Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by famine. This is exactly what I was talking about. So that you not only want to put up money, but you also want to put up food. You also want to put up disaster relief types of equipment. Okay. I have also seen people do this where, when they grocery shop, it is part of their grocery budget to get these non-perishables that they just, every time they go grocery shop, there's a certain amount for these non-perishables and water that they're going to store up. Okay. All right. So it is wise. All right. The Bible counsels us on being wise. Solomon is heralded in the Bible because he didn't ask for things, he asked for wisdom, right? So it is important that we are wise in setting aside resources when times are good, in times of abundance. If stuff is going well for you right now, don't waste it all, right? Take some of that and set it aside, because there will come a time for need, okay, when things are not so abundant. All right. Okay, so let's talk about some strategies for saving, right? Put it on automatic. Set up some automatic transfers to a separate account. Now, when I work with my clients, all right, and if you're interested in working with me, you can get my contact information in the show notes. But when I work with my clients, I teach them how to, one, set up their allocations, and then how to automate those allocations. Okay. Part of that is the emergency fund, so that you have money going to, and it is a separate, account. It's not mixed in with your discretionary or your household expenses, or mixed in with your charitable giving. No, it is a separate thing. Okay. So set it up, put it on automatic, right? Pay it no mind, okay, until you truly have an emergency. Cut down some unnecessary expenses. Now, some people come to me all the time and they're like, I just can't save for, how am I supposed to save for an emergency fund? I'm already living paycheck to paycheck. And when we sit down and we go through their finances with a fine-tooth comb, we are able to identify and reduce some non-essential spending. In other words, waste. We all have it. Okay. For the most part, let me say that most of us, I'm gonna say we all, I'm gonna get myself in trouble, right? But most of us have some wasteful spending going on. Okay. And typically that's in the areas of entertainment, food, and I mean eating out, and maybe even groceries too. Sometimes we might be buying stuff we don't need. Telecommunications, like cell phone plans and all that stuff. A lot of us are spending a lot of money. Cable, a lot of us spending money on a lot of those types of things. And streaming used to be a cheaper way. It still is. But now that there's so many streaming channels, right? People's bills are getting back up there. So looking at all of these things and finding the non-essential spending, and then taking those funds and diverting it to your emergency fund, right? Okay. Enough windfalls, right? When you get a windfall, that is your tax refund, any bonuses from the job, any gifts that you get from people, lump sums of money, put these things in your emergency fund. I know it can be very tempting to want to go spend it, or to want to pay down all the bills. Listen, if you get a lump sum of, let's just say you get, I don't know, $8,000 lump sum somewhere. It could be a tax refund. It could be a bonus of some kind. Most people are tempted to let me just take this and just pay down all my bills. But what usually happens is you've paid down all your bills, but then, the bills come every month, right? So they're back up, and then you're back to your normal habits of spending or whatever. And before you know it, you're back in the same situation again. And you still have no emergency fund. So what you've done is you pay these bills, but you're down to zero. Okay. So if you just have to pay some bills, then I'm saying, hey, be smart about what you're paying. Be very strategic. Maybe something, partial, but don't take all of that money and, spend it on bills or be frivolous with it. take a very large portion of that money and put it up for an emergency. Okay. You can also, we're not talking about investing today, but that's another thing that I would use windfalls for. Emergency investing, emergency investing, emergency investing, not for paying bills. Okay. Now, another strategy that you can use for creating or establishing an unshakable emergency fund is to increase your income. Lexi, I can't just, they're not giving out raises like that. I ain't talking about increase your income on your job, right? Consider some type of side gig or some type of part-time work. Truly, if you can prevent yourself from clocking in somewhere, that'll be great. Or, you know, if it's an ideal clock in where you control the time, you control, you know, you're in control of everything, then great. But consider a side gig, okay, that you can do. What are you great at? Do you do hair? Or can you edit books? Can you do some bookkeeping? Can you, I don't know, what are you good at, right? That you could generate income from and create yourself a side gig. I know everyone is not meant to have a full out business, right? Be a full-on business owner. But I believe everyone should have side gigs. That's what I believe, okay? Because again, when you hit those times of famine, right? And maybe your job lays off, you're going to need something to fall back on. All right. Proverbs 21:20 says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. Okay. So again, this is what I was saying, like with these falls, you get them, but fools gulp theirs down. Fools go waste it, go pay every bill, then they're down to zero within 2 days, right? We want to encourage wise stewardship and disciplined saving habits. All right. So let's talk about some actionable tips for you today. Set a goal. Set an emergency fund goal. Is your goal right now, like, look, I just need to, let me just see if I can get to 1 month of my expenses. Okay. If your expenses is $3,000, your goal is going to be $3,000. Let me get to $3,000 in my emergency fund. And then you're not only going to set the amount, but you're going to give yourself a specific time frame. How long, right, are you giving yourself to do that? I'm going to save this amount in 3 months. I'm going to save this amount in 2 months, 1 month, 6 months. Okay, so the amount, and then put a time on it. Create an emergency savings plan. Okay, determine how much you're going to put away each month or each paycheck. Okay, and then now, if you're working with me, this comes automatic, okay? Because when we set up your allocations, this is part of it, okay? So you're going to determine how much you're going to save each month. If you're working with me, it's going to be based on your allocation. You're going to set up automatic transfers into that dedicated account. Again, if you're working with me, I'm going to show you how to set up these dedicated accounts. All right. And then the third actionable tip that I want to give you is you're going to monitor and adjust. Remember what I said, like finances is never a set it and forget it. You always have to go back and monitor and adjust. How often is going to be different for people, but you always have to go back and monitor and adjust. So you're going to regularly review your progress. You're going to make the adjustments as needed. And then you're going to celebrate milestones to stay motivated, right? If you got to that 1 month of expenses, celebrate. If you got to the 3 months, celebrate. If you just made your first deposit, into your emergency fund, and you are all out committed to it, celebrate, okay? Don't celebrate by spending the emergency fund, by the way. All right, Luke 14:28 says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? So this is the importance of sitting down and planning and setting realistic goals so that you can be successful in establishing an unshakable emergency fund. Okay. And then stay committed, folks. Be disciplined. Remember, the way that we stay committed to our goals is by remembering or keeping in front of us the outcome, keeping in front of us the experience that we want to have. Remind yourself, if you've already gone through this before, like, remind yourself, I don't want to be in a position where if there's some kind of economic collapse or a personal collapse or whatever, I never again want to experience not having money set aside. It was so hard. It was so tough. It was so stressful. It was so, remind yourself of the pain, right? So that you can stay focused on what it is that you are trying to, that you're not trying, that you're going to accomplish. Okay. So setting the goals, keeping the outcome before you, keeping the pain before you of a past experience before you sometimes can be very helpful so that you stay committed to building an unshakable emergency fund. Okay. You can use some visual things too to help you stay committed and disciplined, like a chart, or like some apps. There are great apps you can use to track your progress visually. You can have an accountability partner, or someone that you share your goals with, is a trusted friend or family member, someone that's going to hold you accountable, or someone else that this person also needs to do it, is very motivated to do it. And so you guys are doing it together, separate accounts, of course, but you're doing it together and you're encouraging and motivating one another. And then avoid temptations. Keep your emergency fund in an account that's not easily accessible. Typically, I have my clients to put their emergency funds in a utility bond, a municipal bond. There are other few things that you can put it in, or if it is, you're just bent on having it in a bank account, don't get a debit card for that account. Like, don't make it easily accessible. Of course, now with online banking, you can easily transfer between banks and things like that. In fact, I might say, like, put it at a bank that is not with your main checking accounts and things like that. Do not get a debit card, anything like that. Or if you just, you're like, well, but what if there's an emergency and I need a card? Get the debit card, give it to somebody to hold. You don't keep it, right? Somebody that you trust, of course. So these are just some different things that you can do to help you stay committed to building that unshakable emergency fund. Galatians 6:9 says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. The reason why many of us don't have an emergency fund today is because, many of you, I should say, don't have an emergency fund today, is because we give up. The moment, we are over here, maybe in our discretionary, and but I really want to go with the girls, then we're dipping over into instead of exercising some discipline, we give up. It's easier to do. But then we complain when we don't have things that we need when we need them. So the Bible encourages us to persevere, to be steadfast, right? Do not become weary, because it's going to pay off. I promise you, when the time of famine comes, you're going to be like thanking yourself, right? Because you did what was required. So what have we learned today? We learned that an emergency fund is for emergencies. Oh, and I said that I was going to, talk about some things that we think are emergencies that aren't necessarily emergencies. So sometimes we have things happen, like let's take the vehicle, for example. And because we have not done the regular maintenance on it, the tires have become bald. We just driving. That's our negligence. And so now what happens? The tire blows. Now you have a much bigger expense, because not only do you have to get the tire, you may have to get it towed. You may have messed up the rims, but now you have to get rims, right? So take care of things as they happen, or as they need to be, as they need attention. If things need regular maintenance, do the regular maintenance, okay? If you start to, the brakes start to squeaking, take care of it, right? The squeak Some people think, oh, the squeak went away. That's a bad thing if the squeak went away, because that thing might be tearing into your rotors. And in a few hours, like, you're going to be hearing it eat into your rotors, right? So, and then, and again, if you have an emergency fund and these things do start to happen, you're good because you got money set aside. Now, my clients, what we do is the emergency fund is one thing, but we have a maintenance line item, right? For the car, for the home, the whatever. There's money that we're regularly allocating for the regular maintenance. So that is not an emergency. Okay. So anyway, we talked about the difference between what's an emergency and what's not. We talked about some strategies for saving. We talked about the importance of having an emergency fund. We talked about the best time to, be putting away is when you're in a time of plenty, right? Don't wait until the time of famine, right? So we talked about how much you should have in an emergency fund. We talked about some saving strategies. So we've talked about quite a bit. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And because you have tuned in, I want to give you all an emergency fund tracker, an unshakable emergency fund tracker. So there is a link in the show notes or a link in the description, whatever platform that you're on. There is a link where you can get this tracker, download the tracker, like make a copy, download it, then you can customize it, okay, based on what we talked about here, right? How much do you need in your emergency fund? You can put, set that goal, how much per month, all that good stuff, everything that we talked about today, right? You can use this emergency fund tracker to do, okay? So gift for me to use, something practical that you can use. So click on the link and get your unshakable emergency fund tracker today, okay? So thanks for tuning in. Join us next week. What are we talking about next week? Let me see if I can find it here. We are going to be talking about investing. I love investing, y'all. So we're going to be talking about investing, okay? Why investing is important. What are some investment options? We're going to be talking about risk management, diversification, all that good stuff. So join us next time as we continue this series on getting our financial lives right? Getting organized in our finances. Join us and we'll see you next time. And don't forget to click on the link and get your emergency fund tracker. All right. Peace.